ACT-1. The Pressure of Perfection and the Birth of an Ego. The story begins in the late 19th century. Douglas MacArthur was not born as an ordinary child, but rather as a family project. His father was a legendary general of the American Civil War. His mother, Pinky, molded him with an extreme, unyielding belief: you were born to be great. To prove himself worthy of the MacArthur name, Douglas entered the United States Military Academy at West Point. There, the young cadet faced hazing so brutal it nearly cost him his life. Yet, Douglas gritted his teeth and endured, adamantly refusing to name his tormentors in order to protect his honor. He graduated at the top of his class with a record-breaking score. From that moment on, Douglas was not just an officer, he had formed an impenetrable psychological armor, an ego that placed itself at the absolute center of history. ACT-2, the D'Artagnan of the Expeditionary Forces. World War I broke out, providing the perfect stage for that ego to perform. Arriving in France, MacArthur refused to be a general who hid in a command bunker. The young officer shocked the entire army by marching into battle without a steel helmet or a gas mask. He wore a floppy crushed cap, a turtleneck sweater, and carried a riding crop, strolling casually through the barrage of German artillery fire. That bravery, bordering on arrogance, made his soldiers worship him like an immortal god. He became the youngest general in the U.S. Army, his chest heavy with medals. When the war ended, MacArthur firmly believed he was a military genius who would never know the bitter taste of defeat. ACT-3. The Philippine Abyss and the Vow of Survival. But tragedy always lies in wait for the complacent. In 1941, World War II erupted. Shortly after Pearl Harbor was bombed, MacArthur made a fatal mistake. His hesitation and overconfidence led to the total destruction of his air force in the Philippines before the planes could even leave the ground. The American forces were backed into a corner, facing the imminent threat of capture. The U.S. president ordered MacArthur to flee to Australia. Having to abandon tens of thousands of his own men to escape in the dead of night was a crushing blow to MacArthur's immense pride. When he safely reached Australia, with a haggard face but eyes burning with vengeance, he made a deeply personal vow: I came through, and I shall return. From that second onward, every action he took in World War II was aimed at a single goal: redeeming his humiliation. ACT-4. The Art of Vengeance and the Viceroy of the East. Instead of feeding his troops into bloody, frontal assaults to retake every single island from the Japanese, MacArthur proved his genius with his island-hopping strategy. He took the long way around, cutting off supply lines and leaving hundreds of thousands of Japanese soldiers to starve and rot on isolated islands without firing a single bullet. In October 1944, he kept his promise. In a masterclass of theatrical imagery, MacArthur proudly waded ashore in the Philippines. Announcing his return, America crowned him a 5-star general of the army. When Japan surrendered, MacArthur was given absolute authority to govern the defeated nation. Here, he reached the absolute zenith of his glory. He stripped the Japanese emperor of his divine status, personally oversaw the drafting of a new democratic constitution in just 6 days, and resurrected a nation from the ashes. No general in American history had ever possessed the kind of absolute, godlike power of an Eastern monarch quite like he did at that time. ACT-5. The Inchon Gamble and the Fatal Blow of Hubris. In 1950, the Korean War began. The UN coalition forces were pushed to the brink of annihilation. At 70 years old, MacArthur unleashed one final tactical masterpiece, the Inchon landing. Defying extreme geographical risks and the heavy objections of his superiors, he successfully landed his forces behind enemy lines, completely flipping the momentum of the war. But this brilliant victory is exactly what destroyed him. MacArthur began to believe he was truly an infallible force, larger than the American political system itself. As his army pushed close to the Chinese border, ignoring stark warnings from Washington, he arrogantly declared that China would never dare intervene. He was disastrously wrong. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese troops flooded across the border, driving the Americans back in a bloody, freezing retreat. Unable to accept defeat, MacArthur's ego exploded. He demanded the use of nuclear weapons, pushed to expand the war into China, and publicly wrote letters criticizing President Harry Truman's orders. It was a showdown between a legendary general who wanted victory at any cost and a president who wanted to protect the Constitution and prevent World War III. Ultimately, civilian authority won, President Truman ordered MacArthur's dismissal, ending his glorious career with a humiliating radio broadcast while the general was eating lunch. Epilogue: The fading of a legend. Despite being fired, MacArthur returned to the United States not as a pariah, but as a demigod. Millions poured into the streets of New York in a massive ticker-tape parade to welcome him home. Standing before a joint session of Congress, MacArthur delivered a deeply emotional farewell address. With a somber, resonant voice, he borrowed the lyrics of an old army ballad to write the final lines of his own epic: "Old soldiers never die. They just fade away." He stepped back into the shadows, leaving history with a deeply conflicted legacy, a hero who saved millions of lives. The architect of modern Japan, but also the ultimate embodiment of blind hubris that nearly dragged the world into the fires of atomic destruction.